The movie starts with a peaceful sequence showing a father named Nick and his beloved son at a local fuel station. While Nick is outside filling up his car with fuel, his son walks inside the convenience store to get some coffee. Suddenly, a dangerous group of gang members arrives at the scene. They aggressively enter the store and start shooting. Among them is a young man participating in his very first violent gang initiation. His hardened companion pressures him to shoot. The helpless son begs for his life, but the pressure is too intense. The nervous boy pulls the trigger, shooting Nick's son, who dies instantly on the cold floor. Nick hears the commotion and desperately tries to catch the killer. He manages to grab him, but the young criminal violently struggles to break free. Before the boy escapes, Nick pulls off his face mask, vividly memorizing his face. The boy breaks away and runs out, discovering his gang has abandoned him. Nick does not chase him because his only priority is saving his child. He rushes his son to the hospital, but it is too late. His son is declared dead, which completely breaks Nick's heart. Soon after, the police capture the young killer. Nick recognizes him instantly in a formal lineup. A few days later, the legal trial begins. Nick hopes the criminal will receive the harshest possible punishment. However, a lawyer explains that the killer will likely face no more than 3 years in prison or a fine of $3,000. This light sentence is because the boy acted under extreme peer pressure without prior personal malice. The lawyer mentions Nick can fight for 10 years to get a death sentence, but realistically, execution will never happen. Nick leaves the meeting deeply depressed, knowing this is not true justice. On the day of the trial, the judge asks Nick if this is the man who killed his son. Nick surprisingly answers no. He lies because a dark plan has started forming in his mind. The killer smiles arrogantly, feeling like he has won. The judge releases him due to the lack of identification. Outside, the gang members celebrate the release. They take him to a party, unaware that Nick is watching them from a distance. Nick secretly follows the gang. He observes the gang leader, Billy, taking the young killer to an apartment. Billy gives the boy some money and leaves. Armed with a sharp knife, Nick enters the apartment and attacks the young killer. The boy tries to defend himself, but Nick is blinded by rage and stabs him to death. Once the boy stops breathing, reality sets in, and Nick is struck by intense panic. He realizes that in his quest for justice, he has become a murderer himself. To destroy evidence, Nick throws the murder weapon into a river. When he returns home, his wife and second son notice his terrified behavior. He walks straight into the bathroom, turns on the shower, and begins to cry heavily. He is weeping because he feels his own humanity die the moment he took a life for revenge. The next day, Billy discovers his younger brother was the killer Nick murdered. Falling into a state of shock and rage, Billy reads the morning newspaper. He notices a prominent article detailing the death of Nick's son, while his brother's death is barely mentioned. Billy angrily rants that society only cares when a wealthy businessman's child dies. He vows to discover who killed his brother and exact a brutal revenge. Meanwhile, the police discover the gangster's body. An officer visits Nick to inform him that his son's killer has been found dead, assuming it is the result of a turf war. Hearing his friend remark that justice has been served, Nick experiences a sudden shift in emotion. The heavy guilt vanishes, replaced by a dangerous belief that his violent actions were completely justified. Billy actively investigates the murder. The girl living at the apartment admits she saw a strange older man nearby. Based on her description, Billy confirms Nick is the murderer. The gang begins tracking Nick's movements. While walking down a street, Nick senses he is being followed. Before a gangster can shoot him, Nick swings his heavy suitcase against the man's arm, knocking the gun away, and runs for his life. The gang pursues Nick through the streets, firing multiple gunshots. Nick runs into a busy hotel, knocking over objects to block the path, and escapes into a multi-level parking garage. He intentionally triggers the alarms of several cars to attract help, but no one arrives. A gangster corners him on the top level, but Nick fights back with surprising ferocity. He traps the gangster against a car door, repeatedly slamming it. During the struggle, the brakes fail, and the vehicle rolls backward. Nick leaps out just in time as the car plummets to the ground, killing the gangster. Nick takes another car and escapes. When Nick gets home, his wife delivers stressful news. Their second son has not returned from school. Nick drives to the fuel station where his eldest son was killed and finds his second son mourning there. Overwhelmed by fear, Nick loses his temper and yells at his son to get into the car, trying to protect him from the deadly threat. Meanwhile, the gangsters find the suitcase Nick dropped. Inside, they find his personal documents and a family photograph. Billy decides to target Nick's entire family. He sends a man to Nick's corporate office, who drops the empty suitcase onto his desk. Inside is the family photo, with every face crossed out with a marker. The gangster openly threatens Nick before walking out. Nick finds a phone number on the back of the photo and calls Billy. Billy explicitly threatens to murder his entire family. Nick warns Billy that he will suffer the same fate as his dead companion. Billy coldly replies that the boy Nick killed was his biological brother. This revelation fills Nick with terror. He realizes this is now a direct blood feud between two broken families. While driving home, Nick calls his wife and frantically warns her that their lives are in danger. When Nick arrives, a female police detective is waiting for him. She states the police know he killed the young gangster. Nick finally confesses the truth, explaining he did it out of grief. The officer promises to help and stations 2 guards outside. In the middle of the night, they are awakened by a loud car horn. The gangsters have already murdered the guards and are breaking into the house. A gangster shoots. In the middle of the night, they are awakened by a loud car horn. The gangsters have already murdered the guards and are breaking into the house. A gangster shoots at Nick, who dodges the blast and strips the gunman of his weapon to defend himself. Suddenly, the screams of his wife and son echo through the house. Nick rushes to the living room and finds Billy holding them hostage. Without showing mercy, Billy shoots Nick's wife and son right in front of his eyes. Billy then shoots Nick and leaves them all for dead. Miraculously, Nick survives and wakes up in a hospital bed. A doctor informs him that his wife passed away, but his second son is barely alive in a deep coma. Nick visits his comatose son, weeping and apologizing. He realizes that if he had let the legal system handle the criminal, his family would still be alive. He makes a firm resolve to eliminate Billy once and for all. The female detective begs him to end this cycle of violence, but Nick ignores her completely. He pulls out his Roman 4 lines and walks out of the hospital. Despite his severe injuries, he alters his physical appearance, shaves his head, and begins intense physical training. He withdraws his life savings and tracks down a local bar where Billy's gang hangs out. Nick visits the bar to gather intelligence. When the thugs mock him, Nick responds with immediate violence, easily overpowering them. Next, Nick visits a black market illegal weapons dealer and purchases heavy firearms. The dealer reveals a shocking truth. Billy is his son, and the boy Nick killed first was also his son. The dealer states he will not stop Nick because Billy has become a monster, but warns Nick that if he asks for Billy's exact location, he will shoot him. Nick takes his weapons and leaves. After practicing his shooting skills in an isolated area, Nick tracks down one of Billy's close associates. Nick points a gun at him, forcing him to reveal that Billy is using an abandoned mental hospital as his headquarters. The man calls Billy to tell him Nick is coming. To prove he has changed into a cold killer, Nick shoots the associate dead while Billy listens over the phone. Realizing the threat, Billy begins packing to flee. His arms dealer father arrives, demanding Billy stay and kill Nick to recover the stolen merchandise. Disgusted by his father's lifelong greed, Billy snaps and shoots his own father dead. Suddenly, Nick arrives, intentionally ramming his car into the gang's transport truck and killing a lookout. Nick enters the dark hospital, moving like a professional soldier and shooting every gang member he encounters. Finally, Nick corners Billy in a large room. The 2 men engage in a fierce shootout until their weapons run out of ammunition. Suddenly, a hidden, wounded gangster fires a shot at Nick, striking him deeply in the neck before dying. Billy, also wounded, drags himself across the floor and mocks Nick, stating that Nick has finally become a monster just like them. Nick pulls out a concealed backup handgun, looks at Billy, and asks if he is ready to die. Tears fill Billy's eyes, and Nick pulls the trigger, executing him. The movie draws to a close as a heavily bleeding Nick drives Billy's car back to his suburban home. He walks into his living room and collapses onto the sofa, looking at old family photographs. He realizes that although he won his war of revenge, it cost him his entire family. His eyes begin to close as he slips closer to death. Suddenly, the female detective enters and delivers a final piece of news. His comatose son has officially regained consciousness. A peaceful smile appears on Nick's face. He knows that by sacrificing his life, he has permanently secured his surviving son's safety. The movie ends on this bittersweet image.